hope I didn't scare you none.
No, I was just resting my eyes. It's a lonely night.
The night wind swept across the empty platform, carrying with it the faint hum of crickets and the smell of a rain-soaked earth. The last train had come and gone an hour ago, leaving behind only silence, dim lanterns, and a young woman fast asleep on a wooden bench. Asterisk. Her name was Clara Dawson, a seamstress from Carsonville who'd spent the day traveling in search of work. She'd been promised a position in Redstone, sewing dresses for the town's ladies. But the interview had run late, and by the time she returned to the station, exhaustion overcame her. She sat for just a moment to rest her eyes and slipped into a deep sleep. Asterisk. When she awoke, the platform was empty. Her heart sank as she realized the truth. She'd missed the last train. Asterisk. Clara stood, shivering, pulling her threadbare shawl tighter. The lamps flickered weakly. The next train wouldn't come until morning, and the nearest inn was 5 miles away, too far to walk in the dark. Asterisk. She glanced down the dusty road that led out of town, then toward the telegraph office locked. Even the station master had gone home. For the first time that day, Clara felt truly alone. Asterisk. That's when she heard Ida, steady clip-clop of hooves echoing from down the street. Asterisk. A tall figure rode into view, outlined by the faint glow of the station light. His hat was pulled low, his coat long and dusted from travel. He rode a chestnut horse that looked as worn yet steady as its rider. Asterisk. He stopped near the bench and dismounted, giving her a polite nod. Asterisk. Evening, miss, he said, voice warm but cautious. You look like you've been waiting a spell. Asterisk. Clara swallowed, unsure. I missed the last train, she confessed softly. Asterisk. He took off his hat, revealing kind eyes and a face that looked both rugged and gentle. Well, that's a shame. Ain't safe for a lady to be out here alone this late. Name's Caleb Turner. I was heading back to my ranch, about 10 miles west of here. Asterisk. She hesitated. Strangers were dangerous, and she'd been warned about men on the road. But there was something about the way he stood, not too close, not demanding, that made her feel less afraid. Asterisk. I don't have anywhere to stay, Clara admitted. The inn is too far to walk. Caleb glanced toward the dark horizon, then back at her. Tell you what, he said slowly, you can ride with me. My ranch ain't fancy, but there's a warm stove and plenty of room. You can rest the night and catch the morning train from the next town over. No harm meant, I promise. Asterisk. She looked at him, really looked, and saw sincerity in his weathered face. After a moment's pause, she nodded. Asterisk. All right, she said quietly. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Caleb helped her onto his horse, careful and respectful. The saddle was high, and his hand steady at her elbow. When she was seated, he swung up behind her, keeping a polite distance as the horse began to trot down the road. Asterisk. The countryside stretched wide beneath the starlit sky. The moonlight brushed the hills silver, and the night was filled with the sounds of crickets and the occasional rustle of wind through grass. Asterisk. You travelin' far? He asked after a while. Asterisk. Just to Redstone, she said. I'm looking for work. I sew dresses, nothing fancy, but I'm quick. Asterisk. He smiled slightly. A hard worker, then. My ma used to sew all our clothes. Said needle and thread could mend more than fabricate could hold a family together. Asterisk. Clara smiled faintly. Your mother sounds wise. Asterisk. She was, Caleb said quietly. Passed last winter. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. Thank you. I've been running the ranch since. It's a lonely kind of work sometimes, but I manage. Asterisk. The horse slowed as they reached a narrow trail lined with cottonwoods. The air grew colder, and Clara shivered. Without a word, Caleb slipped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Asterisk. She opened her mouth to protest. Het. Can't have you freezing before we get there. Asterisk. His coat smelled faintly of saddle soap and pine. It was heavy, comforting. She pulled it closer, feeling a warmth that went beyond the fabric. By the time they reached the Turner Ranch, the moon hung high. The house was simpler, single-story cabin with a stone chimney and light flickering from inside. A dog barked once, then wagged his tail as they approached. Caleb tied the horse and led her inside. The warmth of the hearth met them instantly, filling the small room with the scent of wood smoke and coffee. You can sit by the fire, Sid, setting a kettle to boil. I'll get you something warm to eat. Clara obeyed, sitting on the worn armchair near the flames. Her eyes stung with exhaustion and relief. She hadn't realized how tired she was until that moment. Caleb handed her a plate of beans and cornbread. Ain't much, but it'll do. It's perfect, she said gratefully. They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, the wind whistled against the shutters. Inside, the fire crackled softly. When she'd finished, Caleb pointed to a small door near the corner. You can take the room there. Clean sheets. My sister used to stay here when she visited. You'll be safe, I promise. Clara rose, clutching his coat. You've been so kind, Mr. Turner. I don't know how to thank you. He smiled faintly. You already did by trusting me. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and biscuits. Caleb was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a ledger. He looked up as she entered. Morning. Hope you slept well. Like a log, she said, smiling shyly. Thank you again for everything. He poured her coffee and slid a small paper bag across the table. Packed you some lunch for the ride. The station's about 4 miles from here. I'll take you there after breakfast. Clara looked at the bag, then at him. You've done too much already. He chuckled softly. A cowboy's gotta help where he can. World's hard enough as it is. The ride to the next station was quiet but warm with easy talk. She learned he'd once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but after his father died, he'd taken over the ranch. He learned she'd lost her parents young and had been sewing since she was 13, by the time they reached the station. The morning sun painted the sky gold. The train whistle sounded in the distance. This is where I get off, she said softly, dismounting. Caleb handed her the lunch and tipped his hat. You take care of yourself, Miss Dawson. Redstone's lucky to have you. She hesitated. Will I ever see you again? He smiled gently. Maybe someday. The West has a way of crossing paths when you least expect. She wanted to say something more, but the train's whistle cut through the air again. With a grateful smile, she boarded through the window. She watched as Caleb stood beside his horse, the wind tugging at his hat. When the train began to move, he lifted a hand in farewell. She waved back until he disappeared behind the rising dust. Weeks passed. Clara settled in Redstone, sewing dresses for Mrs. Whitmore's boutique. Her skill quickly earned her praise and steady work, but her thoughts often drifted to the quiet cowboy who'd helped her when no one else would. One rainy afternoon, the shop door opened and a familiar voice said, "Excuse me, ma'am. Heard there's a fine seamstress in town." She turned and there he was, Caleb Turner, rain dripping from his hat brim, a shy smile on his face. Mr. Turner, she exclaimed, stepping forward. What are you doing here? Brought some calves to the auction, he said, removing his hat. But truth be told, I was hoping to see you again. Her heart skipped. You found me. Couldn't forget the lady who fell asleep at the station, he said, grinning. She laughed, cheeks warm. Well, I'm glad you didn't. That evening, they walked through the rainy streets, sharing stories and laughter. Caleb told her about expanding the ranch, and she spoke of opening her own dress shop someday, when he escorted her home. He stopped by the gate and reached into his saddlebag. I brought you something, he said, handing her a small, wrapped bundle. Asterisk. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of cloth, soft, sky blue fabric, finer than anything she'd ever worked with. Asterisk. For your first shop dress, he said. Thought it might bring you luck. Asterisk. Tears welled in her eyes. It's beautiful. Thank you. Asterisk. He took a deep breath. And, if you'll allow me, Miss Dawson, maybe one day I could see that dress in person at our ranch. Maybe, instead of a station platform. Asterisk. Clara smiled, her heart full. I think I'd like that very much, Mr. Turner. Years later, visitors to Redstone often spoke of Caleb and Clara Turner, the cowboy and the seamstress who'd built both a ranch and a life stitched together by kindness, chance, and a single missed train. Asterisk. Whenever someone asked how they met, Clara would smile and say, asterisk, I fell asleep at the station and woke up to a whole new journey.